Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D, brought to you now by the OBR. Tommy Rees, it is now official, has been named the new offense coordinator for the Cleveland Browns. Now, keep in mind, this was maybe, 9-10 days. It was Sunday after the Browns finale that they had moved on from former offense coordinator Ken Dorsey. Tommy Rees had been with the team last year, had been the tight ends coach for the Cleveland Browns in 2024. Now, this was one where the Browns were going to kind of have to act kind of quickly. Now, you have read a lot about this for the OBR insiders. You knew exactly where this standing was as far as Tommy Rees being a guy that they were really, really high on. Our own Brad Stainbrook did a fantastic job reporting on this over the last week or so. Had their final interview yesterday with Clint Kubiak. Now, keep in mind, now that the way that looks, obviously, there is friendships within football. There are friendships within the NFL. Certainly, maybe Kubiak was certainly a contender, but there was a clear-cut favorite. But, when you have guys that you've been friends with for a long time within this league, you're going to give them the courtesy. And that seems like what the interview yesterday was for Kubiak, who did make his way out to Seattle today to possibly to interview for the possibility of being the Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator. Now, with Rees, the Browns, and I've said this many times, and you guys heard me talk about this, it was something they were going to have to act quickly on. Tommy Rees, at where he is, he'll be 33 years old in May. He is a guy who's on a crazy ascension as far as moving up the coaching ranks. He was even mentioned, I don't believe Mike Vrabel mentioned him by name, but certainly he was mentioned as a conglomerate of guys that, Mike was going to want to talk with. Now with the New England Patriots, Mike Vrabel, I'm speaking of course. So that is something that, something you're going to consider looking at. So with that, the Browns knew they had a quick window here. As far as whether or not, they wanted to get Tommy interviewed, get all their other interviews out of the way. And this is one thing that maybe was beneficial to the Cleveland Browns is, having their season end, the day before everybody else's. They were quick out there. They didn't really have to waste time with, the exit interviews, all of that. They were, already talking about, lining up offense coordinators, certainly as the season dwindled down, but they were already into it by Monday and Tuesday. Tommy Rees, if you don't remember, I'm sure many of you do, former Notre Dame quarterback, had a brief cup of coffee in 2014 as an undrafted free agent with the Washington Redskins. I believe his stint with I guess they were the Redskins then, I guess, sure. But now Commanders was only 1 week long. So, Tommy didn't really even impress in the, in the rookie camp enough to stick around and get invited to training camp that year. 2014 was kind of in limbo. 2015 went to Northwestern as an offensive assistant. Got his feet wet. Then from there, in January following the season, off to the Los Angeles Chargers. He spent 1 season with the Chargers as a offensive assistant there. Keep in mind, yes, it was the San Diego Chargers back in those days. Spent quality time in Notre Dame, of course. January 17th, he went to Notre Dame, his alma mater. He was the offense coordinator. He was the quarterback's coach in his time there. Probably had to be a little bit more difficult, seeing as, Tommy was there, younger guy, not too far removed, from the guys who are currently playing for the Fighting Irish. Certainly put his stamp on that team. 2010, the team went 10-2, went and lost in the national championship at Alabama. So more just the idea. Certainly 2023 is where things really started to pick up momentum for Tommy Rees. Went down to Tuscaloosa. Became Nick Saban's offense coordinator for what was Nick Saban's final year down in Alabama. Had a good relationship, a great relationship, certainly with Jalen Milroe. Jalen Milroe fell back to the pack a little bit in 2024. Was fantastic in 2023, basically working in lockstep with Tommy Rees. Changes at Bama. And for Rees, it was probably, tough. I mean, you went from being offense coordinator to one of the top collegiate programs. And the best you could do the following season was be a tight end coach in the NFL. Browns were lucky to get him. At the time, it was very quick, and they were able to get him in to be their tight end coach. Mike Rabel, we know, had spoke well of Tommy Rees. They had developed a relationship as, late night film guys, just pouring through tape. Certainly, Tommy Rees, drew an affinity from, Andrew Berry, certainly Kevin Stefanski, and others on staff as a young and up and comer. So for Rees, it was an opportunity, where, and this is still where I think this is interesting for Tommy Rees. Tommy Rees, most likely, as we know, is the play caller. Most likely as the offensive coordinator. Most likely, as we know, Kevin Stefanski is probably going to go back to calling plays. So for Rees, he's taking this job. And, as an offense coordinator, you work very tightly with the quarterback position. Well, right now, whoever the quarterbacks are possibly going to be in 2025 for the Cleveland Browns, you have that feeling that they maybe aren't here. They most likely are not here. So I think that also shows what Rees feels about the position he has put in here with the Browns. Certainly has a deep history with this franchise. Was a former, ball boy while his father worked in the front office back in the day. I think he was like 14 years old or something, as the story tells you, for Tommy Rees. So certainly has, somewhat of an affinity, for this franchise, has a relationship for this franchise, does Tommy Rees. So now, takes this job. And again, when I talked about this was taking the job basically on blind faith. I'm assuming Tommy Rees has gotten some reassurance and some confidence from the general manager, from the head coach, that he is going to have a very, maybe a voice, how strong the voice, because Browns are bringing in 3 quarterbacks, minimum, bringing in 3 quarterbacks. Is it going to be, 1 free agent, 1 trade, 1 draft, 2 free agents, 1 draft, 1 from the draft? We're not exactly sure the dynamics and the architectural scheme of how this room is going to be built, but there's going to be 3 quarterbacks brought in, for him to work with. And you definitely feel for Tommy, you just look at it from his perspective, and he hadn't interviewed yet. And maybe some teams drag their feet, maybe, it just happens, too late with the Vrabel hiring in New England. Or maybe Tommy Rees was just happy being here, because you would have thought that, if there was going to be a need for Tommy Rees somewhere else, people would have understood the urgency of the matter. And maybe they did reach out. And maybe the time they did reach out, Tommy Rees was set in, I want this gig, because Tommy Rees is taking this gig with his eyes on something else. What's next for Tommy Rees after his offense coordinator position with the Browns? Is it to go to college? Apparently he was the runner-up. And, sorry, but you're not beating out Bill Belichick, Tommy Rees, right? Apparently he was the runner-up in Chapel Hill to Bill Belichick. Does Tommy want to go the collegiate route? Does Tommy Rees want to go the NFL route? But this is what Tommy Rees, in taking this position with the Cleveland Browns, look, everything's a stepping stone, right? When you're in this position, you're trying to get to that top chair. And whether that top chair is located on a college campus, or whether that top chair is in one of 32 NFL buildings in the NFL, time will tell. But the Browns, after a suave move in getting Tommy Rees here last year, made the correct move today in promoting Tommy Rees to be their offensive coordinator for 2025. A lot of work to be done, Might as well go with the young man who's looking forward to the challenge. We will continue here on Browns 3D. Of course, now we are part of the OBR now. And again, appreciate everybody for finding their way over here. Appreciate everybody, for the support. We are putting together nights of great content. We had 3 shows for you tonight. Right after myself today, you're going to get a couple of Browns legends in Barry McBride, and also in Fred Greetham. Just guys who have been covering the Browns forever. So make sure you stick around when you're done here. Make sure you're subscribing to the channels, of course, as well. Now, with Tommy Rees coming in here, and it's not like Kevin Stefanski's, I would consider him an older guy, obviously, but you've got this younger voice here as well now in Tommy Rees. And the Browns are going to draft a quarterback. There is no question about that. Question is when. Question is how high. Question is what's their flavor. When we talk about, whether or not they have interest in Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, the belief is you're only getting one or the other. So are you in love and infatuated with one of them? And if so, is that the one you might not be able to get? Then you start looking, elsewhere within the draft. It's foolish not to look at Jalen Milroe's name right now and believe that there is not something there as far as a huge possibility between the Browns and certainly between Jalen Milroe. It's going to be interesting because there's not going to be anybody in the Browns building who's going to have more knowledge on Jalen Milroe than their new offensive coordinator, Tommy Rees. Jalen Milroe probably could have used another year, but maybe he felt, between the switches, and the coaching changes between 2023 to 2024, for some reason, his camp felt it was time for him to go. Jalen Milroe has already graduated with more than 1 degree. So the intelligence, the maturity is not something you're questioning. We have seen what he could do in the 2023 season. Again, Alabama just wasn't as good in 2024. Certainly some of that can be attributed to Jalen Milroe. He will be going down to Mobile for the Senior Bowl, so another big opportunity for Jalen Milroe there. Certainly an opportunity for the Browns to start their courtship with many of these quarterbacks in the 2025 NFL draft. 6'2", 220, 225. Got a good build to him. We know he's fast. We know he's very fast. Strong arm. Accuracy issues, certainly. Seems like a quarterback on tape when he's really in the groove. He's really great. Also seems like a guy on tape, when he's struggling, it kind of sticks with him a little bit. I'm not saying you draft Jalen Milroe and you automatically think he's the starting quarterback in 2025. Be foolish. I'm not going to lie to you. But you start looking at traits, the arm strength, certainly the running ability. This is nothing the Browns have had in this 8 seasons now that I've been covering this team. There has been no quarterback who has the overall athletic and running skill that Jalen Milroe does. Certainly something, if you can, nuance out and can get, the refinement that he needs as a thrower, you're hoping, again, he's not Lamar Jackson, he's not Jaden Daniels, but you're hoping you're getting somebody that can kind of get on that path where they can basically terrorize a defense one of two ways, either with their arm in the passing game or certainly with their rushing ability. I don't know where I stand necessarily on Jalen Milroe overall, and there's going to be times to, fine-tune these up as the process goes. And again, anybody who's talking about this quarterback class and is just like absolute slam dunk, this is the guy, more power to you. Okay, more power to you, because I think it's a flawed class. It certainly does not help that it is a shallow class. But, you know, would I be comfortable with Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders? Yes. Would I be comfortable with either one of them at 2? No. Jalen Milroe, even though I do like him, can I get him at 33? 33? I'd be comfortable at 33, but because of this class and the overall lack of quarterbacks, is that going to vault some of these quarterbacks to get drafted higher than they deserve, which certainly doesn't do them any favors and only increases the amount of pressure on said rookie quarterback and certainly on said organization that drafts said quarterback, right? Jackson Dart. Certainly would be comfortable with Jackson Dart. But Jackson Dart is probably going to go in the second round as well. I've talked about Kyle McCord, but, early day 3, that'd be fantastic. I don't believe that's realistically where he's going to get drafted because it is just a shallow class. Tommy Rees and Jalen Milroe certainly have, the rapport, of course, so if it were to go that way, you already can have these conversations before it's even a possibility that you are drafting him. Kevin to Tommy Rees. All right, Tommy, sell me Jalen Milroe. How does he fit into my offense? Where does he win within my offensive system and structure? Where does he lose within my offensive system and structure? There's a lot all around here with this. There truly is. So that is something that the Browns are going to get great firsthand insight on, and certainly will help them accelerate either A, Jalen Milroe is a flat out guy that they want here with this team, or B, they feel there's too many issues that they think they might not be able to work through with Jalen Milroe. But you're going to keep in mind, there's probably going to be, in my opinion, 2 veterans here. Maybe a Justin Fields, maybe a Daniel Jones, and Mac Jones, but name is really actually McCorkle. These are names of guys that are probably going to be here. So it doesn't have to mean that Jalen Milroe becomes that guy from day 1. And again, it would be a terrible thing to do. And this is where also it can get very interesting for Jalen Milroe is you go down to the Senior Bowl, and with the athleticism and, some of the traits he has, I think it translates to Jalen Milroe looking good down in Mobile. There's nothing complex. Everything's kind of vanilla. So the intellectual, smart guy who's a hell of a great athlete and competitor should find a situation like that and should be able to succeed down in Mobile. Bodes well for him. We talked about the fact that he's got more than 1 degree already. The interview processes down at the Senior Bowl, the interview process at the Combine. These are all things that should go extremely well for Jalen Milroe. Now, one of the things also with this is with Jalen Milroe is there's going to be a lot of talk about what happened in Tuscaloosa this year as far as the team not succeeding, as far as, a big cultural change within that program, within that locker room, with Nick Saban leaving. And, as Jalen Milroe was a captain and a leader, what happened? How did you try to help it? So he really, really becomes a bigger name now to watch for the Cleveland Browns. Pete Smith is one that's touted for Jalen Milroe to this point here at the OBR. But certainly, with the hiring of Tommy Rees now as your offensive coordinator, you believe that Jalen Milroe, and I'm not saying he rises the board or not, but he certainly becomes a name here that the Cleveland Browns probably are going to have a great idea of information and background on said guy, but he just connecting the dots simply, you feel that this is now a guy that can be a legitimate target for this team. I am Jeff Lloyd. We're going to continue here at Browns 3D. Big news of the day. The Browns have promoted tight ends coach Tommy Rees. He will now be the offensive coordinator for the 2025 season. Now, again, you're getting Tommy Rees, a now almost going to be 33-year-old offensive coordinator. You going to get him a kid. Again, anybody listening to this, I'm not eliminating DTR from any part of this equation. So, please don't think that, this anything I'm saying here today is a testament on DTR. He will get his opportunity in the spring and the summer, I do believe. So, again, now, everybody wants to, make the case that Cam Ward's already sold to Denver. I mean, to Tennessee. Maybe the case. It may not be the case. I think it's way too early to tell. Then there is how does the whole Shedeur Sanders thing work out for the Browns? Certainly something to monitor. No question about it. How does it work out for the Browns? Is that somewhere where they think he's a guy that can fit here? Does the Sanders camp somehow think there's a fit there? If you talk to anybody who's anybody, I mean, everybody believes that Shedeur Sanders was basically locked in to the Raiders for an extremely long time. Well, the Raiders messed around and cost themselves their shot at a clean shot at Shedeur Sanders. So now if you're the Browns, is it something you're going to entertain? Because if you can get a first-round pick and you can get their second-round pick, you have pick 33 already. That kind of gives you ammunition now if you're Cleveland. Say you want to be in on Jalen Milroe, but you're certainly not going to do that at one, or I'm sorry, obviously at 1 or 2, or maybe even 6 where the Raiders select if you were to go and trade down. Now you get yourself in a position where you got those 2 second-round picks. Can one of those picks bring you Jalen Milroe? Do you have to use one of those picks and another pick to maybe jump back up into the end of round 1 to assure you're going to go after and get a guy like Jalen Milroe if he is, in fact, your guy? So there's a lot to monitor here with this. There's an extreme amount to monitor here with this. Where do you draft a guy? I mean, if one of these two guys that they feel between Ward or Sanders is it, or both of them, then you don't mess around. You don't get cute. You just take them. But the if is a big if, and it's understandable. Second round is probably a sweet spot between Milroe, between Dart. McCord, I think Kyle McCord's going to get drafted in the top 100. You just look at what he did last year statistically. You look at the bounce back from his troubles in Columbus the past year. It's really hard to believe that, a guy like that who put up those type of statistical output last year is something that you're really, really going to. Now, there's a lot of other things certainly going on here, Cleveland Browns related, as far as, the rest of the roster. The offensive line room is certainly going to be interesting. The first domino I think that everybody's going to be looking at here and everybody's going to be waiting at here is certainly going to involve, Joel Bitonio. When everybody tries to say, what means something, what doesn't mean something, other guys, when they were talking about Joel Bitonio in their final, media sessions of the season, everybody tried to make it sound like they were good. They figure he'll be back, this, that, and the other thing. Well, really, really difficult to, take that, believe that, for whatever it, could possibly be. But that is certainly one of the biggest dominoes of the offseason as far as the roster. It certainly is Joel Bitonio. There's no question about that. You have some other big questions, certainly injury related, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. I understand that there's nothing they can give us, and I get that. I truly do. But, saying words like I hope and, he's, seeing doctors and all of that certainly does not give you much hope. It's just the verbiage of it and the way it sounds. You certainly get nervous about, some of these things directly related, certainly to the health of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Mike Hall, as we know, is another guy going through, a lot. David Bell, also a guy, that we haven't heard much on, but, certainly went through a very devastating dislocated hip. Cedric Tillman certainly would be something, been out since the snow game, obviously with the head injury suffered in that game, certainly crazy. And you certainly, have your long-term concerns related to Cedric Tillman as well. Other just big stories going around here for this team right now. But you look at this today and, starting to close it up here. It's just, it's been crazy. What went on here in 2024. And maybe you should have just hired Tommy Rees all along. There's certainly that aspect to it. I'm sure more is going to come out, certainly, on Ken Dorsey and just how bad it was. Again, the offense itself was dreadful all around. You were not going to have the miraculous luck 2 years in a row where you were just plugging in quarterbacks and finding ways to get win after win like you did in 2023. It was not a sustainable pace of success in 2023. Certainly came back to bite them in the can in 2024. But now, you have Kevin Stefanski and this team reverting back to the offense that they are all comfortable with. You will have what you think is maybe this hot shot offensive coordinator in Tommy Rees, who has certainly, logged some miles in his short tenure thus far as a coach in the game of football. So with this, and again, I'm impressed they got it done. I really am, because I thought there were factors going against them. A was the lack of quarterbacks. B was just that, Tommy Rees was probably going to have, other offers. The Browns identified it. The Browns basically, and again, this is coming from the OBR Insider. So if you don't have the subscription, I suggest you get it. These guys made it an absolute done deal. So we continue, with, hopefully the thought process that this is going to be, hopefully a really home run hire in bringing in Tommy Rees. You believe that there is going to be some opportunity here for Tommy Rees to at least have a hand, or at least, some thoughts here in building this quarterback room going forward here for 2025. Again, we've talked about Jalen Milroe. It's a guy he's going to have excellent insight on. He's obviously pouring through tape of Cam Ward, of Shedeur Sanders, of Jackson Dart, all of these quarterbacks, not to mention the amount of tape he is pouring through on free agent to be quarterbacks. Again, the Daniel Joneses of the world, so the Justin Fieldses of the world, et cetera, et cetera. So it's going to be, a long process here for the Browns this entire offseason, filling out the rest of the coaching staff, certainly. Then getting to work, certainly, on all-star games, getting to work on combine, on free agency, on the draft. They have a lot of work in front of them, a lot of work to do, and a lot that needs to be corrected from last season, just falling off the tracks, to trying to get up, pull your bootstraps up, put together a great roster, and basically tell everyone that 2024 was the fraud, which not many are going to believe. They're going to believe that's the reality. But I think you made your first steps today, and your first move today towards 2025. And I believe it should work out pretty well for this team. I really do. And sometimes maybe you don't know what you got till you got. And maybe that was the case with Tommy Rees. And, maybe they learned more about him this year in a short time than at least got it right and gave the young man the opportunity to help Kevin Stefanski lead this offense. Everybody stick around, check out, obviously, Fred and Barry right after this. We are trying to bring you the best content we can here on the OBR airwaves. I am Jeff Lloyd. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D, now available on the OBR.